Welcome to the Solemn Yu-Gi-Oh channel. Today we have a very exciting video. We are joined by Kevin Lenane, serial entrepreneur, CEO of Genamint, and Vice President of Product of Collectors Universe, which is the parent company behind PSA. We're also joined by Gezi TCG, otherwise known as a big Yu-Gi-Oh collector and also consultant for PSA. And then there's me, the host, I guess, owner of audio software company Solemn Tones. And then, of course, more importantly here, the card enthusiast behind Solemn Yu-Gi-Oh. How are you guys doing?
Great. Excited to talk about Yu-Gi-Oh here. It's long overdue.
Yeah.
Awesome. What about you, Gezi?
Similarly, man, like I'm stoked to be here. I really appreciate you hosting us for this, honestly.
Thanks for being here, of course. So the main conversation today is about Holo bleed. So to set the stage for people who aren't completely aware of this, PSA, the leading grading company in the sports card world and also the trading card world, including Yu-Gi-Oh, stopped grading what's known as Holo bleed, which is kind of when the foiling of your Yu-Gi-Oh card shines through the text box where it's actually not supposed to be, but almost every foil card has a little bit of it, and some sets has a lot of it. So when they stopped grading that, there was some reason, we'll get into that. A lot of people were surprised because there was no like instant communication about this. And so after a while, some people worked behind the scenes, it was fixed. So now we basically dive into what was going on there. So I direct the attention to Kevin here. What was the main reason, let's say, behind stopping the grading of foil bleed cards?
Yeah, I know. Before I say that, I do also want to point something out. I don't know if you guys saw on my Twitter, but the first thing you now see when you enter PSA is a giant 6-foot tall Yu-Gi-Oh card, Blue Eyes White Dragon. Literally, it's the first thing in the hallway. It's awesome. It's huge. It's taller than I am. And it's like the first thing in the hall. There's that. There's like the Jordan and maybe like a Tom Brady or whatever. But the first one is Blue Eyes White Dragon. And it's awesome. It looks really cool.
Wow. We need to put that in the video somewhere. I'll be sure to check it. You have it here.
Yeah, I'll send it. But it's definitely, I would say that image in marketing reflects the sort of the kind of the changes that we're trying to make at PSA specifically. And, you know, that it's a good example of kind of like of what we're trying to do here. So to set the stage, I'm going to answer this question directly. I just want to give a little context, which is set the stage. You know, we wound up getting a huge, like the supply and the blend of TCG and specifically Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh cards that we have been getting over the past couple years has increased dramatically, not just in general quantity, but also relative to sports cards. Like that, it's just the hobby and the desire to grade those, and the prices have all kind of increased and converged in a way that we see a tremendous amount of, like I said, both including total and relative. So part of that is, you know, part of that like growth, you know, there are definitely some growing pains around receiving all of this content. And the truth is, you know, as you probably know, PSA's traditional expertise was in sports. That's kind of where we started. That's been the market for a long time. And so a part of this, this change on foil bleeds is sort of like where part of it was just simple growing pains. And I think like, I'll say the decision to temporarily now, which we've reversed it, to halt or sort of not grade as much of the foil bleed cards was really out of kind of an abundance of caution. I think like part of an abundance of caution and partly, you know, I'll be frank, maybe some lack of enough expertise to handle the volume, right? We have some, but not quite enough. And that's part of the reason why we work so much with Tony now is that, you know, it does require, like everything we do requires expertise. It's not like a very generic thing that you can refer to. You need expertise in specific areas to work on these kinds of things. And so the general gist of the original call was, hey, because I'll say this, in sports cards, when you see a tremendous amount of bleeding or other kind of weird overprints, they can mean something, right? Sometimes it actually means the card's authentic, and sometimes it means the card's not authentic. And I think the impression was, hey, this is a little bit different. There's there's foil, it's kind of bleeding through. And I think the general impression was, these could be counterfeit. And because they could be counterfeit or they could be, altered, that we should not grade them because we don't know. Right. And I think like, that's kind of the generic answer. I know it's a little bit vague, but if that's the truth, is that like out of an abundance of caution, rather than just grade things we didn't really understand, we stopped grading them for a period of time. Now, Tony brought this to my attention. I saw it in your video. I sort of studied the issue, and it's clear that it's something that's sort of a natural part of particularly Yu-Gi-Oh cards because of the way they're structured. And they're just different, right? They're sort of these 2-ply, the cards are built differently. And so, I tried to give some education around that internally. We now have a few more people that are really familiar with Yu-Gi-Oh cards. And so, we're willing to say, hey, that wasn't the right call. We're going to go back and, it might've been the right call for us at the time with a sort of intense amount of volume. But now that we kind of have a better handle on things, we're going to start grading those things. And the basic way we're going to deal with this going forward is, as long as so a lot of people don't know this, but as long as the card is kind of identifiable and that the bleeding doesn't make it so that it's difficult to just authenticate the card at all. Meaning if it's totally disrupting the design or covering up labels or whatever,
there's nothing left.
Yeah, like that may be a situation where we don't grade it. But beyond that, if it's stylistically interfering with the card, we're basically going to let it sort out in the grade, right? So in sports cards, there's print marks and things like that, and there's a certain extent at which they'll actually impact the grade. How big things are and how impactful. But like a lot of times they don't, and so that that expert decision, we're going to leave that up to graders and graders that have experience grading these kinds of cards. And so that's kind of the way that we're going to approach this going forward. I'll try and find some examples of like egregious foil bleeds that might not get graded because of how crazy they are, but I don't have any right now. But I'll certainly try and supply some if I do find them, because I think it'll be pretty obvious when you see them, for sure.
They definitely exist.
Yeah, they do. I've seen one, but I just don't have it on me.
I see. So if I can perhaps paraphrase a little, it's like PSA is taking trading card games more seriously than ever because of the amount of growth in the hobby, the amount of hype around it. Of course, they want to make sure that they like keep their professional name behind all of this. And so they wanted to make sure, okay, there's no counterfeiting, there's no weird things going on. And so you became too cautious, too afraid of maybe grading something that shouldn't be graded. But then with more input from Yu-Gi-Oh experts and so forth, that was recalibrated, let's say. Would that be
correct? That's exactly right. Yes.
So the decision to restart it is, can we know anything about how that happened, let's say, with Gezi, whether it's my video, Gezi, and all of that?
Yeah, I mean, it starts with you guys, like that's really where, the issue, particularly with things that were newer, kind of newly popular or sort of new in volume to PSA, it starts with the community. Like we listen to our customers, we listen to our collectors. Like the collectors are ultimately our end customer, and they're the ones that we need to make sure we're providing a good product to. And so that really was where it came from. I mean, I maybe channeled it through to the right places, but, and I'll say this too, there was no resistance. I think everybody kind of explained why, but I think when people understood the concept and understood that, our customers really cared about this, it was like a no-brainer. So yeah, in short, it comes from you guys. It comes from the community. Like we want to serve you guys, obviously we want to also adhere to our standard and apply that, correctly to different areas. But for sure, that's how the decision came about. It was customer based. Right.
So earlier you mentioned how in sports it may affect the grade because some cards, they're so foily that it's no longer acceptable. Now in Yu-Gi-Oh, some sets have more bleed than others. Do you believe that may impact grades, or are you going to have some kind of scale where PSA knows some of these sets have so much foil bleed that it can't be helped? It's going to be the reality. Like, let's say maybe a Magician's Force or a Legacy of Darkness, it'll have more bleed than this other set and it won't affect the grade or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to speak out of turn on that. I think like that's a good question. Let me circle back around with you on that answer. I don't know how to answer that without sort of like taking on the expertise of a grader, which I am absolutely not. I will say, like the examples I was giving, so like it's actually interesting. So in 33 Gaudi, which is actually one of the sets we originally trained gentlemen on. There's a lot of like overprinting and bleeding that's used to authenticate, meaning the cards that are fake actually don't have it. So it's like an identifying marker, but it's inconsistent. Meaning, and there are other sets, one of which we're about to start grading, where the bleed means it's not real. And so there's different levels of it. I think a lot of times people also get confused with the print marks that happen. Like if the cards are stacked up, like some of the back of the other card will wind up on the front of the one card will wind up on the back of another. In other cases, the actual ink physically bleeds through the cardboard stock. So it's just like another it's another data point we use to authenticate and grade. I will say, like generally, if the print marks are minor, they don't really tend to count against the grade. It's really it's a sort of a amount of coverage and how much they disrupt how the card is intended to look. That really has the impact, but I wouldn't want to sort of take on the role of a grader and say exactly how that would work. I think that probably the easiest thing to do is, maybe if we do this again, like bring some examples and kind of talk to them.
Sure. Cool. So with the higher standards, let's say that you're trying to introduce and have been introducing into trading card game grading, to really nail that industry, because it's still a bit different from sports. There have also been cards been removed from the pop report to ensure that it's all real cards, it's all properly situated and so forth. Gezi has been posting some of these on Instagram where, this particular card, they removed a few from the pop because reason XYZ. Is there any info that you or Gezi can maybe share about that as well, or?
Well, we take fraud and alteration very, very seriously, right? It's authentication is the core, right? The grade only gets applied after we authenticate cards. Mm-hmm. And so, it's core to our business, and we spend a lot of time on it. I mean, Anthony can speak to this. We have, 7 or 8 people in different subject matter areas who are constantly looking for cards in different, whether it's Pokemon or 90s basketball, they're constantly looking for cards to flag so that we can review them on the market, in forums, et cetera. We also are spending a lot of time in the tech side, building out a system of ways to alert those subject matter experts and graders to, hey, this is like one of these particular cards that is often fake serial numbered or backdoored or whatever, and really have very specific information when we see, a card that's often comes in trimmed or altered, et cetera. So we are spending a lot of time on that generically. I don't have any specifics. I know I've seen a few things that Tony has flagged for sure, but I don't have anything specific on that. Tony, do you remember which ones we took down and why?
Yeah. So, I mean, Maxime, some of us like pretty meticulously track this stuff, count pops and weigh like how many of which are which and how many of which are the other and all that stuff. And that's how we get like a lot of the authentic wavy counts for some of the varietals that aren't recognized, for better or for worse. I happen to think for better, but I mean that's just me. So so we flagged the Asian English versions of Blue Eyes from LOB early on in 2015, 16, and 17, when guys didn't really grade that much and there wasn't a lot of expertise or hired expertise in any grading company. For example, these cards were misattributed as North American English cards, and we're trying to make sure that the certs match the card. That's all. So that when you look up the cert for the card to determine authenticity of whatever language or whatever region, which has a huge difference in value for the cards, that you're seeing the true actual card that it is, rather than this is a North American card, or for modern grading, this is a reprint or it isn't, right? And so that matters because collectors want authentic stuff, right? They want the stuff that came out first, right? They want rookie cards because that's the way that the collector world works. I mean, so I think that going back and making sure that we're tuning the certs to make sure that they're accurate, because we know stuff that we didn't know then now. So going back and making sure that things are right is important, I think, especially when it comes to like Upper Deck Entertainment produced Yu-Gi-Oh cards, like from the Lost Millennium and Power of the Duelist and things like that. We're talking like as Yu-Gi-Oh guys who know all this stuff, like, but again, like PSA, hires experts like my sister or other people who work, like Kyle, who works down as a Yu-Gi-Oh guy, right? And nothing is more, I think nothing speaks more volume than paying money to hire expertise on a very specific thing, right? PSA is willing to invest money into Yu-Gi-Oh directly.
Right. So I want to make it very clear for the viewers at home, the removed cards from that pop were not fake cards. They were just, they had a different label. So they were Asian English. Is a different card than an American, but it's not that these were fakes.
And by the way, in those cases, I'll actually we'll try and we fix the cert, on the database side, and then we actually will try and get the card and fix the flip too. So obviously it depends on the customer's willingness to send that to us. And sometimes they are, sometimes they don't want to, but we will try. We will say, hey, we'll fix this, fix it up, and send it back. So honestly, it is. It's a customer-friendly, it's a customer-centric move as well. Like, we want people to get the card they're expecting and not, get something else. And so it's just another thing that we're doing. It's not obviously fraud, but we call like a mislabel. It's an error that can happen, particularly on more fringe stuff. And, we do attempt to fix those very, very often.
Yes, of course. And that's also like very, very good. I remember when I got into this hobby, this wasn't the case yet. And then Anthony worked very hard with you guys. And it seems like more and more, all of the standards are really being put in place to make sure that, Yu-Gi-Oh gets graded just the way it absolutely has to be. So that's very awesome. Now, at one point, PSA acquired Genamint, which you are the CEO of, and it basically specializes, as far as I'm aware, but I'm no expert at this, in AI grading. Mm-hmm. Now, is there anything more that can be said about this? A time scale for integration of it, or is there any type of info that you can give that's new or special?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I mean, I've definitely talked about this, so I don't want to repeat myself for sure, but like, I'll say this, we are using it, we're working on integrating it right now to further our efforts against fraud and alteration and sort of tracking. I think we are trying to, we want to identify the cards, whether they're in or out of their slabs, using fingerprints. We want to verify the spec of the customer. You can do that in an automated way, meaning if we can tell you what kind of card and what number card it is, so the 86 was a Conseco, or 2002 Blue Eyes White Dragon, like that. We have technology that can tell that, and that is actually what we call a spec ID. But the customer also provides a spec ID, and so we can do a quick match and make sure that those things line up, so that we can verify what the cards are, what they were pre-spec by the customer as. We're also working a lot on imaging. So we've spent a ton of time, because a lot of this stuff does depend on imaging, meaning we have to get images of the cards as they come in the door, and then on the way out as well. And so, and then when we do that, we can do other things like fingerprinting. But of course, we need to take a good image of the card to do that. And there are customer benefits to taking images too. Of course, you'll have kind of nice images of the cards after they're slabbed eventually and things like that. So there's a lot of benefits to imaging, but a lot of the Genament, the stuff that PSA is using out of Genament has the dependency of imagery, meaning like it all requires a photo. And so a lot of what I've been working on is kind of getting a scaled imaging solution, which I have up now. It's going to be in production shortly on the pre-grade side, and so like meaning on the raw card as they get opened here at PSA. But so I've been working a lot on that, and some of my previous tech team has been working on this fingerprinting piece. I think that's like going to be the early integration is detecting cards, and also like just knowing, hey, this card's been. The reason we want to know that cards when they're resubmitted is really about the population report too. Like we don't want, if somebody keeps trying to send in a card to get regraded and they're, doing things that we don't necessarily, we don't really want people cracking the cards out of their cases for a variety of reasons. But when people do that, it also disrupts the population report, right? It's not reliable if cards are taken out of their cases and regraded. We need a way to track that. If there's only, like I said, if there's an of 5 card, we should only see 5 of those. We shouldn't see 7 or 10. And so, at the very first stage, it allows us to be more accurate in the pop report and also prevent some of the things that happen around fraud when cards are taken out of their slabs and resubmitted.
Right. So if I can paraphrase, I would say it's going to improve your sorting in some way, going from package to getting into grading, I assume, while also matching whether someone is not lying on their PSA form. And then
I wouldn't say, I don't think we think they're lying, but I will say people make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. And so confirming the spec ID that's been provided. And that also, by the way, this issue of the flips being correct, that it flows right. That is what's on the flip. You know what I mean? So like all of this, they improve things. They're incremental improvements that happen kind of across our value chain. But this is, it's like, it's making sure it's correct. And then all the way to when it's printed out on the flip, like making sure all that's accurate so we don't have to relabel things. And then again, the other one is making sure that cards that are trimmed, recolored, et cetera, don't make their way into our slabs.
That makes sense. Awesome. So I have one final question that is 100% based on YouTube comments, and I can already smell that it can't be answered, but I'll just ask because otherwise people will blame that I didn't. Do we have any news whatsoever on lower grading tiers opening up? Essentially, right now you can only sub in at the express level, and everyone's waiting, when can we send in for cheaper? And
so we send our comment cards in.
Exactly. When can we send in my $5 card?
I don't have any. I can't give any information on that particular. I appreciate you asking. I'll tell you this. We all know people don't want their cards graded at $200 forever or $100. You know what I mean? Like we know that that's not what people truly want, and we're working on that. But as far as specifics, I don't have any in terms of timing.
Completely understandable. So thank you so much for your time. I think I'll wrap up the conversation right here. If you have any final comments, I'd love to hear them.
I think I just want to mention again, we are excited about Yugioh. We're excited about TCG. I'm excited that it's like a whole new world of collectors, which I love. It's like a little more international. It's pretty broad geographically, and I love that. And, we're going to continue to do a lot of things to support this community a lot. It's not going to be just this kind of stuff. There's going to be a lot of things we're going to do to support this community, and we can come back on and talk about those things in the future, but just expect that we are going to accommodate you guys, on a continued basis.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So this was the conversation. I hope all of you enjoyed it. Be sure to like, comment, leave your thoughts, subscribe, and I will see you soon. Ciao.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.